Welcome to the Dark Goddess, where we celebrate the women who dared to live differently.
She was a world-class ballerina, known as Les Domino Rouge, the girl in the red mask, who, for a time, never revealed her true identity. Les Domino Rouge was an international sensation, becoming a masked superhero when she saved a little girl from drowning. Theatre magazine reported the sensational appearance of the dancer Les Domino Rouge. It said, "This mysterious lady was first heard of in London, where she appeared in hotels, cafes, beautifully dressed and wearing always and everywhere a red mask. Every possible effort was made to force her to reveal her identity, but without success. The only words she would ever say were, 'I'm going to America.' This statement was cabled across to the United States, and people began immediately to take an interest in Les Domino Rouge. Finally, the mysterious lady landed in America. She was a sensation. People flocked to her performances. Adjusted for inflation, she was pulling in $55,998 weekly at the height of her tour. Finally, she appeared at Weber and Field Music Hall, where she unmasked and revealed herself as an American girl from Detroit, Daisy Peterkin, aka Mademoiselle Dazie. Explaining her life journey, she said, "While I have danced ever since childhood, imitating every new step I saw, it wasn't until I was a well-grown girl of 14 that I decided to make the stage dancing my profession. And I picked the most difficult style of all as my specialty. So I started in to learn toe dancing. But it was only dogged determination to succeed that kept me at it." She called her style of dance as tripping lightly on her toes. She said, "It took me 3 years of persistent practicing to enable me to do that trip without pained expressions indicating that it was anything but light and pleasant. I look back upon those 3 years of training as one long, terrible nightmare. But my dream came true, for my first appearance was a sensational success. For the past 3 years, I toured all over Europe, triumphing over the dance traditions of the ballet masters as the only American dancer who ever excelled them in their own field." As a young teenager, her role models were famed dancers Isadora Duncan and Ruth St. Denis. She was self-taught and performed in local vaudeville houses, taking the show name of La Belle Daisy. She was no stranger to vaudeville, because when she was 8, her father moved the family from St. Louis, where she was born, to Detroit to manage candy franchises in vaudeville theaters. She danced in regional vaudeville theaters. She earned good money. In 1901, at the age of 17, and able to afford the trip, she went abroad to study classical ballet and joined the court ballet 1 year after arriving. And she made Suganda, ballerina, in her second season in the Royal Opera of Russia. After this, Daisy appeared in unique dancing specialties in the leading houses and music halls of London, Paris, Berlin, Vienna, Budapest, and Hamburg. She was the first American to distinguish herself in classical ballet. And if that wasn't enough, she mastered jiu-jitsu and later incorporated it in her dance. One of her dance teachers was the legendary Lois Fuller, a pioneer in both modern dance and theatrical lighting techniques. Fuller also helped the famous dancer Isadora Duncan ignite her European career in 1902. Influenced by Fuller, Daisy merged modern dance with ballet and made use of colored light in her act. In 1904, she returned to America for a tour of 10 weeks over the Keith vaudeville circuit. During that season, she accepted an engagement at the Wisteria Grove in New York under the direction of mega show producers Louis F. Werber and Mark A. Lucier. Werber and Lucier were a premium production team. Mark A. Lucier was smitten by Daisy and became her personal manager. They became an item. Together, they cooked up one of the most amazing promotion schemes ever. Daisy Peterkin, aka La Belle Daisy, would take on still another identity. She would travel back to Europe, where she would wear a red mask, keeping her identity secret, and announce herself as Le Domino Rouge, which is French for the girl in the red mask. She would grant no interviews and say only, "I am soon going to America," in broken English with a Russian accent. And off to Europe she went to assume her new persona. The PR stunt worked, and that stunt became legendary. It was at the Folies Bergère in Paris that she first appeared as Le Domino Rouge and danced masked, claiming that the glare of the footlights to be too painful for her eyes. Le Domino Rouge appeared everywhere in cafes, hotels, theaters, known only as Le Domino Rouge. Amazingly, no one connected La Belle Daisy with El Domino Rouge. Instead, rumors had it that Le Domino Rouge was of noble birth due to the suggestive golden coronet embroidered on the right side of her mask. Some suggested she needed to keep her noble birth a secret. Music halls tried to put her under contract, but she refused, of course, because it was all a promotional stunt designed to create interest in her upcoming American tour. The international press could not get enough of her. Interesting side note, The Scarlet Pumpernickel, 1905, is the first novel to feature a masked superhero. Hard to say which came first, but Le Domino Rouge was the first live masked hero, male or female. She returned to America in 1905 as Les Domino Rouge and created a sensation, keeping her identity a secret. Even on the White Star ocean liner during her trip to America, she was identified on the passenger list as only Les Domino Rouge. So popular had she become that the press was there at the dock when she arrived. She was the first passenger to come down the gangplank. She, of course, had her red mask on, followed by her attending maid. She made her way to an automobile and was whisked away, never saying a word to the press. When the press interviewed other passengers, they learned she always had the mask on and seldom spoke. A total mystery. The press was hooked. People began reporting spotting her in restaurants, hotels, theaters, and even a church service on New York fashionable Fifth Avenue, but always wearing her red mask. The reviews of her shows were stellar. Performing at the Paradise Roof Garden and the Wisteria Grove, she was described by one reviewer as a dancing devil from Paris whose manner is original and eccentric. She makes you wonder if she ever walks flat-footed. The tips of her toes are all she uses. Just a side note here. During these performances, Daisy appeared with a young 16-year-old Elsie Janis, who would later become very important and popular in the Ziegfeld Follies. Elsie was prepped by Daisy's husband, Mark A. Lucier. But more on this in a later chapter. Les Domino Rouge performed in the dance halls and vaudeville stages with the red mask over her face. Her top-notch dancing, coupled with the mystery of who she was, created a publicity bonanza. She was the talk of the town. Venues where she performed would distribute souvenir postcards days before her performance. Polly's Theater handed out thousands of such promotional cards. No vaudeville act in New York had been so well advertised. And here is what made her a superhero. In 1906, she was back in London performing at the Paris Theater for $750 a week. That would be $20,399 a week in today's dollar. But then suddenly she showed up at the Hyde Park Waters and saved a drowning girl. The newspapers went wild over the girl with the red mask who jumped into the waters and saved the little girl from certain death. The Royal Humane Society medal was being considered for the masked, unnamed hero woman. However, after the heroic act, she was nowhere to be found. She was staying at the Hyde Park Hotel, but she was not there. On September 9th, 1906, Les Domino Rouge was finally found lying unconscious. She had been poisoned by a chronic form of ptomaine poisoning, that is, food poisoning. But just how did this happen? Lying unconscious for an entire day is serious and perhaps due in part to a health issue she had. Her health issues would resurface later when she gets stabbed in the chest with a knife, but more on this later. At that time, nothing more was said of the food poisoning, nor of her unconscious state. Being the determined person she was, she just moved on. By the end of 1906, she finally revealed herself as Mademoiselle Dazie. Her unmasking came at Weber's Theater in New York to a packed house. It was announced on every billboard all over town. And she had a new stage name. The former La Belle Daisy was now Mademoiselle Dazie, a new name. The new name had been suggested by her manager husband, Mark Lusher. The renowned Broadway producer Oscar Hammerstein immediately contracted her as his premier dancer. This show was a huge honor for her. Mademoiselle Daisy was a popular sensation for Hammerstein. Her success was, quote, spectacular and unprecedented, as few toe dancers have ever established a vogue in America. Meanwhile, Lorenz Ziegfeld was putting together a new show called Follies of 1907, and he needed headliners to assure the show's success. He was drawn to the immensely popular Mademoiselle Daisy, and she and others like Nora Bayes, Grace LaRue, Annabelle Whitford were all contracted to be his dream team. Well, that and the 50 Anne Held girls, soon to be known as the Ziegfeld Follies. But Daisy was the chief attraction. The first ever Follies was a smashing hit in New York, and it was soon on the road to such places as Washington, D.C., Boston, and Chicago. And Mademoiselle Daisy was always headlined, always looking for fresh ways to present dance. Mademoiselle Daisy introduced a jiu-jitsu waltz, just exactly how she combined classic dance with the martial arts has been unfortunately lost to history. But there, on the Ziegfeld stage, she was performing jiu-jitsu as a dance. Very unique and most unusual. But it wasn't as eye-opening as her Salome. The show would end with Mademoiselle Daisy performing Salome, doing the dance of the 7 veils, and the audience would go wild. What was the dance of the 7 veils, you might ask? Well, this is a very interesting story. Basically, it was a striptease. It was a reenactment of a scene from the Bible. Striptease in the Bible? Well, yes, or at least Oscar Wilde's version of it in his wildly popular play entitled Salome. In the Bible book of St. Matthew, chapter 14, the daughter of Herodias danced so seductively before King Herod that he offered her anything she wanted. She requested the head of John the Baptist. Though the Bible does not name the daughter of Herodias as Salome, the Jewish historian Josephus does. Artists through the years have artistically imagined what this seductive dance may have looked like. In so doing, Salome became a symbol of a dangerous female seductress. Oscar Wilde wrote his take on Salome in the 1896 play, which includes his Dance of the 7 Veils, and it was promptly banned in London. Later, it was combined with the music of Richard Strauss and premiered at Dresden, Germany in 1905. And it was off and running. Salome, dressed only in 7 veils, would strip them off slowly during the dance until she had nothing more on. Louis Fuller, Daisy's teacher, was the first solo dancer to present a Salome. During the turn of the century, Salome had a particular meaning to the emerging new woman who was taking control of her own sexuality and breaking from the subjugation to men. Here in Salome was an independent sexual woman demanding the head of a man. The symbolism spoke to myriads of women. Salomania was born. Women everywhere were wanting to perform the part of Salome. You might say that Salomania was part of the turn-of-the-century feminist movement. Salomania was also the beginning of modern striptease, where veils and clothes are slowly removed in time to the music. It's crazy to think, perhaps, but modern striptease was sparked by a Bible story. Salome was Ziegfeld's most successful act in his Follies of 1907, and Mademoiselle Daisy was the one who performed it. The staging was based on Audrey Beardsley's famous illustrations appearing in Oscar Wilde's published play. As Daisy would perform the Salome Seven Veils dance, the police would arrive and arrest Daisy, and the Follies would burst into the can-can dance. It was all staged, of course. But what a great closing act it was. The audiences loved it. No wonder it was the most popular act of the 1907 Follies show. To capitalize on the Salomania craze, Mademoiselle Daisy and her husband decided to open a school for Salomés for 2 hours each morning atop of the Jardin des Paris Theatre. They graduated and sent forth up to 150 Salomés a month, filling vaudeville and burlesque halls nationwide with strippers. Mademoiselle Daisy became the most prominent teacher of the art of striptease of her time. Mademoiselle continued performing with Ziegfeld Follies through 1908. Following the Follies, Daisy continued to be in demand, performing in numerous shows. In 1909, she introduced a fad pantomime dance with L'amour de l'artiste, the love of an artist. It was an intense, wordless play told through the dance by 9 mute dancers. At first, many felt she was ill-advised, but it turned out to be wildly popular. The news reported that she had to respond to multiple curtain calls. But then tragedy struck again. In New York, on August 5th, 1909, while performing her highly praised The Love of an Artist, Daisy was accidentally stabbed in her left breast. The knife was supposed to be a fake rubber prop, but somehow it was replaced with a real steel knife. Seeing the blood squirting out and hearing Daisy's shriek, the audience became wildly alarmed, with several women fainting. Mademoiselle Daisy was taken to the dressing room, where it was found she had a very painful 4-inch wound. Fortunately, it was not mortal, but it was significantly serious enough to prevent the actress from appearing for some time to come. But perhaps the lapse had more to do with her health issue, aggravated by the stabbing, than the stabbing itself. 10 months later, on May 19th, 1910, Mademoiselle was granted an interlocutory divorce from her husband, Mark Lusher, on statutory grounds. The reasons were kept private, and the correspondent's name was not revealed. But could it have something to do with Elsie Janis, the talented teenage girl Mark Lusher also managed? In the divorce settlement, he was ordered not to interfere with any of Daisy's vaudeville engagements. He was, after all, the general press representative for the Orpheum theater circuit, where she often performed. Despite his considerable salary, he was not ordered to pay alimony. Unfortunately, just 3 years later, his firm, Werba and Lusher, would declare bankruptcy. Moving on her own, she picked up a gig with Oscar Hammerstein, who had previously contracted her some years back. The pantomime was called A Tragedy of the Mardi Gras. In it, she did beautiful dances and acted out dramatic struggle with a burglar and kills him. The critics rave. She also appeared at the famous Keith's Theater in Boston with none other than comedian W.C. Fields. They billed her as America's greatest dancer. In Chicago, she performed to a packed house at the legendary Majestic Theater, which also hosted such headliners as Al Jolson, Eddie Foy, Harry Houdini, Ludi Langtridge, and Fanny Brice. Her act was proclaimed as the most elegant and artistic act of her career. She married Cornelius Fellows, president of the St. Nicholas Hygiena Ice Cream Company. He was a wealthy entrepreneur and a racehorse owner. He named his prize-winning racehorse in her honor as Mademoiselle Daisy. Her last American stage performance was in Aphrodite in 1910 to 1920. To appear as the ancient Greek goddess of sexual love and beauty was a perfect way to bow out from the domestic stage, because the play reflected the very goddess that she was. She then spent her last year of live acting performing The O'Brien Girl in London with a little vaudeville. She did dabble in film a little bit, appearing in The Black Panther Club, a 1921 silent in a role as Mademoiselle Daphne. The film starred a topless Florence Reed in the lead role as the Black Panther. Interestingly, the film was produced by Lou Ziegfeld's younger brother, W.K. Ziegfeld. The film is now unfortunately considered lost. In 1923, she fully retired from all show business because of her increasing health issues that seemed to have dogged her throughout her career. Mental traumas from bright lights and passing out in near comas. She suffered ill health, especially during 1918 through 1920, and was frequently absent from the stage. She could not go on. She died on August 12th, 1952, in Miami Beach. Her dance career had lasted a quarter century. She will ever remain an example of the kind of determination and hard persistence it takes to succeed at your dreams. Her motto would be, "No pain, no gain." Today, when you see a ballet mixed with modern dance, or even a striptease act, it is in part due to Le Domino Rouge. It is hard to imagine why her story hasn't been picked up by Hollywood, or even a graphic novel series. Think about it. A ballerina, sometimes stripper, trained in the martial arts, saving the world in the disguise of El Domino Rouge, who is plagued by occasional blackouts. Wow! Now that's one series I would not want to miss.
This has been The Dark Goddess, where we dare you to live differently. Live your true self.